Hey guys, welcome to a new video that I wanted to try out today, where I really go over my thoughts on one of my favorite line of phones, Google's Pixel line. It's a little bit different from my usual walking videos, but I think with the impending release of the Pixel 4 and 4 XL, this is a great time to talk about them and really get a better understanding of what's going on, what the story is, what the history is, and what's coming in the future. So let's get started. What I have in front of me are the Pixel 1 XL, Pixel 2 XL, and Pixel 3 XL. The initial most glaring difference between the three, other than the Pixel 1 being white, is that the 3 XL has this gigantic notch. Notches aside, the rest of the hardware doesn't look that different, especially between the 1 and the 2. There's a top speaker on all three of them, actually. There's a camera, two cameras, proximity sensor. All of them have it, but this is the only one where it's really visible. On the back, all very similar design, with the Pixel 4 probably straying away the most from this, since these all have a fingerprint sensor. The G, one camera, flash, some other sensors. And then the 4 will have no fingerprint sensor that we know of, and none of the spec sheets have come out saying there was going to be one under the screen, unlike the other flagships who have been able to do both. Except Apple. Apple is sticking with the Face ID, though I think there have been some other tech instances of them having a under-the-screen fingerprint option, potentially in their 2020 lineup. Will they? We'll see. So Pixel 1, volume and power on the right. 2 and 3, very similar. Pixel 1 has antenna bands, kind of similar to the iPhone 6, I believe. And that's the iPhone that had the bend gate problem. And then we can see right away the other main difference between the Pixel 1 and the 2 later generation Pixels, the always-on display. So Pixel 1 does have an ambient display, but I think after the Android 10 update, it now actually just turns on the screen rather than having it briefly light up. I believe it had that, but it's been a while since I actually used the original Pixel. I do have the boxes of the 2 and 3 XL. I think I finally purged the 1 XL to stop my hoarding behaviors. So turning them all back on, fingerprint sensor on all of them, no problem. Very fast, gets a little bit faster as each one goes on. So Pixel 1 surprisingly has been upgraded all the way to Android 10. I believe they weren't supposed to upgrade it this far, but they gave us that and they gave us Android 10. That's fantastic to have such consistent update support and on day one, and the monthly security updates on the first Monday of every month. It's fantastic. It's really a great showing from Google's software support. From day one, they've had great software support. The problem with their software support, I mentioned in one of my walking and talking videos, is that they can be a little bit more lazy, theoretically, with the updates, where they can create a new bug, but because it's going to be fixed in the next month, it's not as big of a deal to actually have a bug if it's not a game-breaking bug. Be that as it may, frequent updates are better than more infrequent updates like the other flagships, a la Samsung, LG. One brand that has specifically had a fantastic showing in update frequency is the Essential phone, PH1 phone. It's a fantastic little device for good price, great updates. Also got upgraded to Android 10 day one, so that's very impressive. And now some of the other phones are catching up, especially the smaller companies, but that have big offerings like the OnePlus. I believe the parent company is Oppo, but don't hold me to that just off the top of my head. Back to the Pixels. So my whole deal with the Pixels is it's really a story of compromise. There's always been some hardware compromise. Software has been pretty on point if you want a stock Android experience. Now there's been some online controversies. Not that it's a controversy, it's pretty legitimate that Google's Pixels version of Android is not what people say is AOSP, or the completely vanilla Android. It's Google's ideal version of Android for the Pixel devices, which is essentially very clean, no additional nonsense that you might experience from other manufacturers. So again, back to my area where I wanted to mention the compromises. So Pixel 1. Compromises for Pixel 1. One bonus point, again, headphone jack. I didn't mention that going around. Headphone jack, and it did have the USB-C. It was missing other things that other flagships at the time started offering. One big one was wireless charging, but I think an even bigger one on the original Pixel was the water resistance. It didn't offer IP67 water resistance. I believe it was 50 something. I don't recall exactly. My apologies, but this is one of the reasons of the compromise. Other than that, it demonstrated that one camera was enough because Google's software power was really up to par and exceeded everyone's expectations of what it was able to do. Not to mention that the future software updates that came out with every other year of the Pixels actually added functionality to the older Pixels. Again, huge bonus. No other particular compromises I can think of other than the usual big flagships like Apple and Google not having an SD card. Samsung went away with that a little bit, but then brought it back. And I think that's kind of a nice little thing to have, especially if you're going to offer lower storage capacities on these phones. If I recall correctly, this is the 128 gigabyte model of the Pixel 1 XL, and it also came in a 32 gigabyte option. It was okay for the time. We're going to see why that becomes an issue as time goes on. And I believe, hey Google, how much RAM did the first Pixel have?
On the website techradar.com, they say, ever since the original Google Pixel handset, Google's smartphones have had 4 gigabytes RAM, but when many high-end and even mid-range devices now have 8 gigabytes, that's starting to sound a little low. To find out more, look for the link in your Google Home or Google Assistant app.
Okay, so as you heard from my Google Home in the corner there, the Google Pixel line has had 4 gigabytes of RAM from the beginning. But it does bring me back to one other aspect of the Pixel 1 that then has not occurred in the Pixel 2 and 3 and will likely not occur in the Pixel 4. So Pixel 1, 4 gigabytes of RAM, 4 gigabytes of RAM, 4 gigabytes of RAM. Pixel 1 has a Snapdragon 821. The main flagship of that year, 2016, was a Snapdragon 820. This is the first phone to actually have the 821, which is just a slight improvement, but still, it's nice that because Pixels, the Android phones that come from Google usually come out in the fall, in line with Apple's iPhones, but the main Snapdragon chips that come out in the flagships happen in March, usually with the Samsung flagship devices and some others like Sony and LG. So Google is already 6 months behind on the SoCs in their Pixel line. It's not the biggest deal, again, because they've shown that in terms of performance, their software is so optimized that it actually runs very well. The issue comes along in the later Pixels. So again, top of the line processor in the Pixel 2 XL, 3 XL, but it didn't have any extra bumps in the SoC like the first year did. 4 gigabytes of RAM, 4 gigabytes of RAM. I keep talking about that. So Pixel 2, 4 gigabytes of RAM, again, wasn't a big deal that year. People were surprised as other companies like OnePlus and Samsung started to increase that RAM territory in their base offerings. We would think that maybe there would be a bump to 6 gigabytes of RAM in the higher end spec model, but there wasn't. It was 64 gigabytes of storage and 120 gigabytes of storage, still 4 gigs of RAM. So that was the improvement in the base upgrade in the Pixel 2 series. Pixel 2 series finally added water resistance. Where did it compromise? Other than the RAM, other than the processor, which was still fine. It's fine to have the top of the line processor for that year, the main Snapdragon in this device. Wireless charging, still missing. So Pixel 2 still had that issue with the wireless charging missing. Other compromise in the Pixel 2, the Pixel 2 XL, there was that notorious blue tint. You can start to see that there's a lot of changes in the angle and that it actually changes color a little bit, becomes a little cooler. And this was a difference in the manufacturing. I believe this used an LG screen. The smaller Pixel 2, I think actually used a Samsung screen. Don't hold me to it. but there were less concerns with the screen being an issue in the Pixel 2 regular than the XL, although I think there was even a concern for a reddish hue in one of them. So Pixel 2, very similar to Pixel 1 in terms of what it looks like. Still has the same dual tone finish. The screen is a little bit bigger, more curved in the edges than the Pixel 1, so a little curvier. Again, that's a preference thing. Not everybody likes that, but some people might. But it kind of gives it a little bit more aesthetics to the shape of the phone itself. So the curve, the angle looks about the same as it does from the phone to the screen. No notch, nothing there, but two dual-facing speakers that are both the same size, at least in terms of the grill. Front-facing camera, one camera on the front, one camera on the back, flash, fingerprint, and also upgraded to Android 10. All of these are now in Android 10. Pixel 3 XL is what I've been using as my daily driver since it was released last year. It's actually been a very good phone, and we're going to get into where it falls apart a little bit. In terms of the compromises, this one actually has the least. So I didn't mention that the Pixel 2, well, I did mention in the beginning, but the Pixel 2 loses the headphone jack. Loses the headphone jack. Pixel 3 goes along the same lines, no headphone jack. What it does have now is wireless charging, and it does have the water resistance rating, IP67, I believe. Maybe 68? Either way, better than the 1, 2, and 3 have the same. I think it can take a dunk in the water. Again, you wouldn't want to use these in the ocean. It's just less of a predictable environment than if you were to drop it in the toilet, hopefully before anyone used it. Of course, that's disgusting no matter what. In the pool, chlorine also questionable, but again, more likely to survive in these two than in the first one. Other compromises in this one, the notch. Other than the notch, it's actually decent because it houses two cameras. So the great part about this is it has the front-facing camera, which is regular, which I actually never use, but if you expand it, it becomes wide angle, and you can see my head. So that's a bonus. Still has a front-facing speakers. There was concern that the top one was smaller and less powerful than the bottom one, and that was founded in some cases. Some software updates did improve that, but there's still a disconnect. There was some concerns about buzzing. Again, that's not as prevalent on the forums and on Reddit ever since their updates occurred, so that's improved a lot. By the way, this is one of my favorite wallpapers, Paperland Pro. It's actually a great band from my past, Human Wine. But I like these because the background, because it actually has an update of the weather. It is cloudy outside, not raining right now. Kind of accurate here. I know I could just look out the window and see it, but if I'm indoors, in a basement somewhere where I've been a lot recently for work, it's nice to have this kind of a setup where I can just quickly open my phone, see the background. Hopefully I could find a rainbow. Maybe not, but I do have my weather on the top. My weather is using Dark Sky, which uses an aggregate of multiple weather providers, and you hopefully get a much better representation from an average of many different providers, and then you can get an idea of what the weather is like. Looks like it's going to be raining. It is what it is. The other interesting part about the phones is the cameras did not get much of an upgrade on the back every year. I think 2 and 3 use the same camera module. The 4, I believe, is going to get a newer one, but it's still very similar to the one that's offered in these phones. The screen quality in the Pixel 3 gets a big jump from the Pixel 2. It's an AMOLED display in both offerings of the phone, and it's just much better viewing experience minus the notch. It is possible in developer settings to get rid of the notch, but it's called the display cutout, so at least they used a synonym to be able to find it. So you can hide it, which just pushes everything down. But at that point, there's no point in doing that since the notifications are still getting cut off at the top there where the notch would be. So you might as well have them up in the above region. I think they started poking fun at themselves a little bit with some of these options to be able to do a double cutout. Silly, but good on Google for making fun of themselves. Or if you really don't like your cutout, you can make it taller, although I think I might have just broken it. So I'm just going to go back to the device default and hopefully that fixes everything. Caveat with Android 10 and any of these phones is that if you use a custom launcher like Nova Launcher, which I love, it won't let you use the full gesture package of the Android 10 OS. I do have it on the Pixel 2, so as you can see, you have the full gestures here, and you can pull it up like that, pull the home screen up, pull the apps up, pull the multitasking up, and scroll through. The thing is, when you're in an app, now swiping away from the screen is a gesture. People have found that if you swipe diagonally, that's actually a way to get the menu open, although it's not really a supported gesture by Google. It's just what people have found as a workaround, because right now your gestures from the front and from the left and the right side of the phone, swiping away from the screen, just brings you back. We'll see if it gets some improvements in the Pixel 4, but that announcement is coming very soon. We're only a week and a day away. I believe it's the 15th. Anyway, these are all my thoughts on these Pixel devices. I'm pretty sure I covered everything that I wanted to cover here. We should probably have the phones reversed like this, because the Pixel 3 should be on the right and the Pixel 2 is on the left to make it line up with this. I don't know what I'm doing here. So those are my thoughts on the 3 Pixel phones, 3 generations, compromises in each of them. And that finally brings me to my last point that I definitely wanted to mention. I was very mad at myself right now for forgetting about it. The 4 gigs of RAM on this phone, similar to 4 gigs of RAM on this phone, but whatever they did with the Pixel 3, there is an issue where if you play music or anything like that and you take too many photos, let's see if I can replicate it. So I was listening to some music here. It's going to be hard to actually find some royalty-free music so we don't get into any trouble. So let me open up Twitch. I've been listening to some Kitboga, who's actually great, so let me give him a plug. If you like to hear people interacting with other people, but specifically people who enjoy scamming people, Kitboga wastes their time, and I think it's a great thing what he does. So let me open up one of his and see if I can get this to happen. So this is playing. I'm going to open the camera.
Okay, I do not.
He's using a voice changer here.
To be auto-debited.
So let me see if I can take a few photos and see if the issue that I experience occurs here.
You want to continue the subscription package, you will get charged $299 every month. And
No, thank
you
you.
want to cancel the subscription package, you will
Perhaps
get
they
that
improved
refund within a
what
30
occurs here,
days.
because right now it's not happening.
What do you want
And if I
now?
hold it,
I
still
want you
nothing.
to
Okay.
unsubscribe me.
We're getting there.
So that you don't charge
Sometimes
me
my
every
phone
month,
would disconnect
please.
from the Bluetooth,
And
but
you
for
want to
now it's
cancel
actually
the
not happening.
subscription
If I go
package.
back into the camera, it might need
Yeah, sorry.
an additional thing.
Sorry, it's just
We can
very
try to go to
loud.
Ignite site.
It's hard to tell what you're
And you
saying.
want to
You can already see some slowdown from the processing, but it seems to be working okay right now. Oh, my phone, my phone
Correct. I would like to cancel
just
it.
disconnected from my watch. At the top it shows the little disconnect icon, which means it's standalone right now. It's got disconnected from my phone. So not what I was intending to show you, but it occurred in a different way, and that does happen too. So if you do have your Bluetooth headphones connected and you're doing that, that might happen. So now I have about 100 pictures of these 2 boxes and my rug behind them. I'll probably delete those. I think they're great phones. The software is fantastic. I didn't cover all the fantastic software features. I did want to mention the unlimited storage of photos and videos taken with the Pixel XL. With the Pixel, actually not taken, but stored on. So the Pixel 1 has unlimited storage for life. They tried to back out of that, but it was very misleading for everyone else involved. So a lot of noise was made by the community, and they brought it back for the Pixel 1. They learned their lesson with the 2 and 3, and these have a limited amount of unlimited photo storage. So it ends in 2021, I believe, for the 2, or 2020, and 2021 for the Pixel 3, specifically in a certain time. But it's unlimited full-size storage, full-size resolution storage for all photos and videos uploaded from these devices, lifetime for this one. Do with that information what you will, but it's a great way to back up your photos and videos without worrying about space, especially since all of these do take 4K videos. That brings me to another point. While the photos are always great on these devices, the videos have always been a compromise. So photo, you get a nice wide enough angle. If you go to video, it crops in a little bit. My impression of this is because the video uses a combination of OIS and EIS, optical image stabilization, and electronic. So I think it tries to cut off part of the image to account for any wobble it might have, to have a dual component of stabilization, which is why you get a more zoomed in field of view on these phones compared to others that only have optical image stabilization, for example. But again, you don't get things like 4K 60 frames per second recording, which a lot of other phones offer, and the slow-mo has never been as high frames per second as some of the offerings from Apple and Samsung. So all in all, with the software, they are great devices. Google has made their promises come true in a lot of the software updates. It's been backdated to all the other Pixels. I think that's a great thing. The hardware, never been top of the line, never will be most likely. I wish I had the Pixel 3a with me here because I actually think that's one of the smartest things Google's ever done, where they took a budget housing with most of the components being budget, still 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is another kind of a kick in the face to Pixel 3a and 2 users, with a much lower end processor, but no compromise in the camera. They don't have that Pixel visual unit, visual core, which I think they're changing to neural core in the Pixel 4, but it still can do the same processing, just takes a little bit longer in the background when you take a photo, but you have all the same great camera features that you do on the other devices. Pixel 4, I will say, should have 6 gigs of RAM, and it will have the flagship from this year, the Snapdragon 855, although there's the Plus available now. That seems to be more for graphically intensive phones. So I think the Asus ROG phone, Republic of Gamers phone 2, has the 855 Plus, and I think some other flagships have been getting that as well. So a little bit behind in that, but Pixels have never been the spec kings, probably never will be, like I said. But we'll see if there's any other compromises in the Pixel 4. It sounds like it's going to be the most feature-packed phone out of all of them, although we already know we're missing things like a wide-angle camera on the back. The front camera is actually using a slightly wider one than the regular one, and it's more akin to what's found in the Pixel 3a, so you still get a little bit of best of both worlds in the front, but it's only one camera from what the leaks have shown, and the rest of the space on the top of the Pixel 4, which looks a lot like the Pixel 2, will house the gesture navigation with Soli. We'll see how gimmicky that is. So let's see. We'll see what happens next week. I'll be very excited to see what the 4 shows. I've been a fan of the Pixel from the first one, and I'll continue to buy it. I'm in it for the long run. I'm still excited, no matter what's leaked so far. It's something I've been excited for a while. Google always has some great offerings. So I'll see you next week, and let's see what we get.